Okay.
So, number 2, what were the slaves used for in the South?
Mainly for picking cotton.
Good job, cotton and tobacco. Number 3, were slaves allowed to educate themselves?
Not formally.
Okay, awesome. Number 4, what was the punishment for slaves who sought to run away?
Probably death.
Awesome, yeah, or a beating.
Or flogging.
Yeah. Number 5, were slaves allowed to marry amongst other slaves?
They weren't necessarily allowed to stay together.
Okay. Or as long as their slave master allowed them to. Yep. Who were treated better, field or house slaves?
House slaves.
Yep. Number 8, what year was the Emancipation Proclamation signed?
1865.
1863. That was
Okay,
awesome.
close.
Yeah, very close. Okay, so number 1, what country did the first slaves come from? Skip. Okay, so it was actually ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans were the first slaves. Number 4, what was the punishment for slaves who sought to run away?
Get whipped.
Get whipped? Don't know. So it's either get whipped or death sometimes if the slave master is very cruel. Number 5, were slaves allowed to marry amongst other slaves? No? No, unless the slave master let them, of course. Who were treated better, field or house slaves? House slaves?
House slaves.
Good job, house slaves. Number 7, what was the purpose of the Middle Passage or the triangular trade? That one's a kind of tough one.
Tough one.
Tough one, yeah. So it was actually just to get the slaves from Africa to either Europe or America. Number 8, what year was the Emancipation Proclamation signed? Don't know.
Probably maybe the 1800s or something.
Good job, 1863. Okay, number 2, what were the slaves used for in the South?
Besides, you mean like when they came over to America?
Yeah.
Besides like plantations and like my manual labor and stuff like that, like in the house slaves or field slaves or chaperones, which basically just bitch shit, I guess. Or like the stuff that nobody didn't want to do.
Awesome, yeah, great. Number 3, were slaves allowed to educate themselves?
I do not think so. I think it was against the law. I think you lost a hand or a foot for that shit.
Yeah, unless the slave master, of course, let them.
No book learning.
Yeah.
Yes, number 6, who were treated better, field or house slaves?
House slaves off top. Yeah, they was light skinned. No, light skin was in back then.
Now it's all dark skinned niggas. No cotton, they just brought the tea.
Number 7, what was the purpose of the Middle Passage or the triangular trade?
What was the what?
What was the purpose of the Middle Passage or the triangular trade?
I guess it's like buying and selling slaves. I'm not really sure.
Okay, no, this one's a hard one. So it's actually to get the slaves from Africa to America, Europe.
Ah.
And geometry. They were big sticklers for geometry.
Yes. Number 8, what year was the Emancipation Proclamation signed?
I should know this, but I don't. So.
It's 1863. Number 1, true or false, did Thomas Jefferson own slaves?
I think so. I think that nigga did. I think even George Washington owned slaves.
He owned them too. Dude had crazy jungle fever.
Oh shit, he had some of that dark meat. You know, once you go black, then you broke for the rest of your life. But it's okay.
She got that on film.
Yeah, I know.
Number 2, what were the slaves used for in the South?
Plantations?
Plantations, awesome. So tobacco and cotton plantations. Number 3, what slaves were slaves allowed to educate themselves?
No.
No, yeah. So no, unless the masters let them. Number 4, what was the punishment for slaves who sought to run away?
No idea.
No idea. So it was either a beating or even death. Number 5, were slaves allowed to marry amongst other slaves?
Yes.
Yes, as long as the master let them. If not, they couldn't. Who were treated better, field or house slaves?
Field?
It was actually house slaves. Number 7, what was the purpose of the Middle Passage or the triangular trade?
No idea.
No idea. So it was to get the slaves from Africa to either Europe or America. Number 9, name a few rights African Americans had to fight to receive after slavery became illegal.
Voting?
Huh?
Voting rights?
Voting, yeah, awesome. So voting and segregation.
Segregation.
Number 2, what were the slaves used for in the South?
South of the United States.
Of America, yes.
The years for picking cotton, tobacco, and other manual labor.
Awesome. Number 3, were slaves allowed to educate themselves?
No.
No, unless the slave masters let them. Were slaves allowed to marry amongst other slaves?
No.
Awesome. Number 6, who were treated better, field or house slaves?
House slaves.
House slaves. Number 8, what year was the Emancipation Proclamation signed?
Oh gosh. 1850.
1863. Really close. Good job. And the last one, true or false? Did Thomas Jefferson own slaves?
Yeah.
Yes, awesome. Okay, great.